welcome to Iconoclasting with Sarah Smith. Today we have Genie Gratto, CEO and founder of GWRITES. Hi, Genie.
Hello, Sarah. It's really nice to see you.
Nice to see you and meet you and do all the things. Genie, tell me about GWRITES and how it came to be, and then we're going to go into your entire life story.
Absolutely. Always happy to start at birth and
So
move on
exciting.
from there.
Yes.
Yeah, so I've had GWRITES for a long 26 years actually at this point. But I would not describe it as in its full-fledged version until about 2018, which is when I really started consulting. But it was sort of the place where I housed all of the freelance work that I did and things like that on the side. It was my side hustle business essentially, and started out doing some things in the very early days of the internet and doing crazy content projects for startups that did not make it through the 2000s at all, and then just, kept right on going. When I was ready to make a pivot to full-time consulting, I just kept the business as it was and then have evolved it from there. But the business itself, I'm a strategic communications and narrative strategy consultant, essentially. I'm based in Oakland, California. And I have about 3 decades of experience starting in journalism, working into advocacy communications and brand transformation and all kinds of things, event communication. I've worked all over the place for a lot of different organizations. I have some wild stories. So
I just want to know all of the gossip. I don't know if you have gossip and tea. So you were doing a side hustle before it was cool, it sounds like.
Yeah, I definitely was, which is funny because at the time that I started it, I was also in my first marriage. And I often say I had a starter marriage before starter marriages were cool. He's a wonderful guy. It was, we were very good friends. It was amicable. We just shouldn't have gotten married. But I started the side hustle at that point and was, at that point thinking that I would take it full time faster than I did. But the change in relationship also changed the trajectory a little bit. Part of this is being flexible.
Yeah, that flexibility, adaptability, growth, those are all things that I think are so helpful to being an entrepreneur. And
yes,
because it can also be ego smashing too.
Fully ego smashing. Yes, it could absolutely be that. I love that for us.
Yes. Yeah. So it's very fun. And I was talking with somebody else today about, just learning so much and doing so much. You talk about 2018 is really when it started getting going. I just want everybody to understand this is 2026. So you must have started your business in 2000-ish. Is that right?
It was 2000. Yeah.
Wowzers. Just everybody take a moment to understand that her business can drink and rent a car.
It can rent a car.
Yes. Non-traditional for sure. I mean, you come from a journalism background, where you little Genie going, oh gosh, I'd love to be a journalist and track down people and save the world in the form of words, or what happened?
Yeah, I mean, it was a little bit of that. I fell into it in some way because I really wanted to be able to write and wanted to be able to support my own writing projects. And that was part of it. Now, let me tell you that journalism is a terrible way to do that because even then it paid very little. And also you had to work all the time. And so, yeah, there wasn't a lot of space around the edges for that sort of thing. The point at which I switched from journalism to the oh so lucrative work of nonprofit communications, another banner way to make the cash, was that I had worked for a weekly newspaper and then had moved on to work for a daily newspaper, sort of doing the traditional journalism career ladder. And I had just won 2 pretty major, for me, awards. I'd won an AP award and I'd won a Maryland, DC, and Virginia Press Association award for some work that I had done at the Frederick News Post in Maryland. And I went in because I was also doing my master's at Johns Hopkins at the time, and I was doing it very part-time. And they required me, I could not even get a loan for the master's program. So what I was doing was taking a class and then taking a semester off and earning the money for the next class, and just sort of like working my way slowly through this process. And I went in asking for a raise. I believe I was making $9.65 an hour at the newspaper. And I was like, could I just, like, I actually had to get a second job to pay rent and for this program. And I was like, could I just get a raise to like $10 an hour? Like, that would actually maybe be the difference between being able to buy groceries or not. And the
Oh my
woman
gosh.
who was at the time in charge of HR looked at me and said, Jeannie, there are so many people coming out of journalism school who would take this job in a second. So no, we're not going to give you a raise because anybody would take this pay for this job. And I was like, wow, okay, great. Well, I won't. So I went and found another job and ended up
For
at an
you?
advocacy organization in DC. Yeah, I was just like, I loved journalism. I still miss it on
Yes.
some level. And I just was like, no, this is not good. This is not tenable.
Well, you've got to have a way to eat. I
You
was
do, really?
holding, yeah. I had a leadership academy class that I was hosting earlier this week, and somebody said I'm very passionate about eating and keeping a roof over my
Yes.
head. And I thought
Yes,
that was such a
totally.
perfect answer. I'm just so passionate about that. Same,
Right?
hard same.
Yeah.
So how did like so when did you start G Rights? Was it at that same time that you're like going through your master's program and, getting kicked in the face by journalism people? Like,
It was a little bit later. I was fully working in DC for nonprofit organizations at the time when I actually started doing the side hustle. And I think it was a little bit, I was like, what articles can I get to write? Like, what freelance pieces can I do? Is there
mhm.
freelance content stuff? Again, this was like the very nascent internet. And so I was like, oh, great. Like, there's plenty of people who want random copy on various things. And so I was trying to pick up those sorts of projects and editing projects and things like that. And just, whatever would come through the transom. I spent most weekends sitting at a card table in our living room. Like, I didn't really have a separate office. And I would just sit there on my tiny little power book with a tiny little screen and just write things and try to hustle for contracts. And that was the way.
Oh my gosh, wow. It took me back to like sitting at our gigantic Macintosh computer that we had at
Right?
our house and hitting like colon C back. Y'all don't know what this is. So I could play the video game Doom when I was like
Yes.
8. Why was I doing that? Where
I
were my
mean,
parents? God. Uh anyway, so God bless us, right? So how did I have like a million questions, I think, but so you said you also do narrative strategy?
yeah, so I help now. What I do is, long story later, like now what I do is really help organizations get their story
Yeah.
straight. So it's like, what is it that they're trying to communicate
Yeah.
across the year through their brand, through, I help them build message platforms, things like that. And it's really just about what are the things that they're trying to say that are going to move their audiences in the most useful way. Most of the organizations that I work with and most of my clients are nonprofits, or they are at least within kind of a mission focused space, whether they're B Corps or things like that. Part of that, I always point to the famous Mary Oliver Summer Day poem where it's, what are you doing with your one wild and precious life? I apparently am trying to help people tell stories that will change the world. So that's
That's so
part of,
important
yeah.
though. Like storytelling is so key to what we do, and it's all about connecting with other humans. And
Yes,
I always think about it as what I do is being able to connect and create less friction in their life. Like that's my goal.
exactly. And
Yeah.
I've done a lot of work with organizations that are really into the way they talk about their own work, from a very inside baseball sort of way. I remember I worked for the Teamsters Union for a while. I was their webmaster, and I did a big redesign of their site. And one of the things that we had a lot of conversations about is that none of the members could find anything on the site. And it was because the site, when I started, was set up like the building. It was literally like all the departments and all the divisions within the union. And I'm like, people don't want that. They want to come and, you know, find the thing they're looking for based on what they're trying to do. And again, this was a long time ago. This was nascent internet, y'all. Like, so it was.
Yeah. That beautiful dial up that I'll hear forever in my
I know,
nightmares. Yeah.
right? Right. So, some of the things that drive our UI and UX work now, like this was the point at which that stuff was actually a little more breakthrough.
Yeah. Those days were so much simpler, it feels like. I just talked to somebody who does like AI search optimization. And I was like, oh my goodness, who even thought we needed to do that at this
Right.
point? It's
Right.
crazy. So I know. So you work with nonprofits. Have you ever been tempted to start your own nonprofit?
No, absolutely not been tempted. I mean, there are, I think, part of the thing is, and this actually gets to sort of one of my pieces of advice for people is I really have appreciated the fact that I've been able to work on a lot of different missions that all tied together in terms of like making the world a better place. But like I've worked in like reproductive rights, and I've worked for a union, and I've worked on tech equity, and all of these
Yeah.
different areas. And all of them are things where like I'm trying to help people get more agency and improve their lives in some way, or improve their health, or whatever that might be. But it means that I can use the same tools and the same strategies and evolve those strategies while being associated with a bunch of different things that I care about, because we all hold
Mm-hmm.
multitudes. I am not somebody, I think there are plenty of people out there who are destined and perfect at being nonprofit founders. They have to have such single focus on a single
Truly.
mission to be able to be
Yeah.
that person. And I am not that person. I see many crises that we could solve
Yeah.
and that need to be solved all at the same time.
Yeah. It is, it's hard to play favorites
Yeah. Yeah.
with this.
Yes.
So if you're like, as you're going through this, what is something that you have seen over your career, especially as like, gosh, 26 years of having your own business, be it a side hustle, be it I'm assuming it's your primary mode of income now.
It is. Yeah. Now it is.
Yeah. So like,
Yeah.
what is something that you messed up really bad? Or is it tell us that? Because you've got so much experience,
The
and I
dirt
would love to
on.
hear, yeah, how did you, I can tell you some stuff
Yeah,
that
definitely.
makes it
Well,
easier. But yeah, how did you mess up? Tell us.
I mean, I will, as we are going through tax season right now, I will
God.
go ahead and say that, my strength is in words. It is not in managing my own financial systems. And so I would say that I'm going to admit that there have been multiple points across the 26 years where I have made deep tactical errors around taxes, whether it was like
Ugh.
learning to actually save some money back and withhold for the taxes, which I
Yeah.
didn't know in my early 20s or mid 20s, whether it was
Yeah.
like I made the mistake and then fixed it of not getting my business license set up at the right time in at least one jurisdiction. I will admit to nothing more than that. I paid all the penalties, have paid all the fines, and I am up to code at this time. But it's like things like that where, I wish that there had been, especially when I started, I wish that there had been more tools and more support for entrepreneurs,
Yeah.
which I think there is now. And like, I have an amazing VA, shout out to Yana Kruzanova, who lives in Malaga, Spain, and she is amazing. And like, she keeps me in line and helps deal with all that system stuff that I just don't want to do. And it
Yeah.
frees me up to actually be able to do more business stuff of my own and do the actual client work and those sorts of things. But it's yeah, I mean, I wish I had learned earlier in the process that
Yes.
I really didn't have any energy around that type of work, and I really needed to have good systems in place that other people were helping me with. But those
Yes.
are the sorts of things that cost money, and when you're not making a lot of money on the side hustle, it doesn't feel like you should spend the money. But honestly,
Yeah.
you pay later in late fees and
All the
money
other
you could have
things. Yeah.
saved, all the things like and then you have to hire somebody
Yeah.
anyways.
Yeah. And it's going to be more expensive. So just do it right the first time.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, and it's in Virginia, and I don't know where you are. I should have asked this. You're in Oakland, California.
I'm in
You said
Oakland,
that,
California, but
but
I
you were here.
started the business in Virginia. I was in Arlington.
Yeah, and so it's like they do it where it's like quarterly taxes here,
Yeah.
and that was like such a blow of like, what is that? What does that even,
Right.
Because I've only had my business for 2 years,
Uh,
and so it's all been a great learning experience. And yeah, VAs, virtual assistants, are very helpful.
very
It's going to
helpful.
be my dream one day to work with one, and then I don't have to do all of the silly little podcasting things other than just show up and interview people. Right. And then, yeah. So, I mean, yes, kudos for you. I think being wise about where you're going to prioritize your spend is very
Mm-hmm.
key for your success.
Yep.
And you're totally right. There's so much information around starting your own business that it's like, well, what information is not totally insane?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Like I
Exactly.
started a business in 2018. Yep, 2018. I have to rethink this every time. And it was insane. And I call it like my first failed business because
Mm-hmm.
I shuttered the doors like months later, essentially, and just had it riding into like 2020 when I finally closed it all down.
Yeah.
But it's just like I did so many things insanely. And I went through LegalZoom, which is like an arm and a leg, and they never stop calling you, never stop emailing you. And so it's crazy the things that
Yeah.
you can do. Like they'll spin it up for you, but they'll follow you to your grave
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are things.
Indeed.
Yeah. So being on this journey, I've learned a lot, but I've also been like, yeah, it's fire hose potential
Yeah.
sometimes.
100%.
So
100%.
yeah. So I usually ask people any like 1 to 3 things of if you could tell somebody that's looking at going into entrepreneurship or taking the road less traveled. Like, for
Yeah.
example, I've bounced around from being an English major in my undergrad to pursuing an MBA, managed a biker bar. I've done all of this stuff, right? And I never thought
Right.
I'd get married or had kids. And here
Right.
we are. What happened? And like for me, I'm like, you just know that your ego is gonna get smashed to bits and be prepared to grow regardless of if you're with it or not.
Yeah. Yeah.
So is there yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, the things I do have three lessons that I would pass along to anybody. And the first one of them is, directness is a differentiator. And I think,
Mm-hmm.
women especially often will try to talk around something. Not all women, of course, but, many women were often socialized to be a certain way. And I think that, obviously being diplomatic is really important, but being unafraid to be a
Mm-hmm.
truth teller is really critical, especially if you're coming with any kind of expertise. I mean, I think a lot of what I run into with clients is they think they have hired me to do something, and then we get
Mm-hmm.
into the mix and I'm like, actually, you need to do these 5 steps before we can even get to that. And or
Yes.
like, what you thought you needed is not actually what would be useful to you. The other
Yeah.
thing that I was in fact just talking to somebody about yesterday is with communications, it often, when you start working on communications, it often exposes the underlying structural or systemic or strategic problems that the organization
Mm-hmm.
has overall. And communications cannot drive strategy, but it certainly can help articulate strategy. And so
Yes.
that's one of those places where like I often find myself having to just be a real truth teller to people and try to deliver it in a way that they are willing to hear. I just,
Mm-hmm.
like certainly at this point in my life, I'm like, I'm not going to just say it. It is not of value for me not
Yeah.
to say what is true. So
Mm-hmm.
let us just get past that.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, fully. And I think about that too of like clear is kind. I think that's a Brene Brownism. So I angle to be clear and kind
Yes. Yes.
and not, tell them I struggled in the past with being called some names because I was too direct and too blunt. So I've tempered that. And like I think that you in finding your voice, you will go side to side to the extremes
Right.
very often. So you just have to keep practicing and you're going to mess up and you keep practicing.
Absolutely.
I have a friend that always said the trend line gets better. The trend line starts evening out.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Definitely.
Yeah.
I truly believe that expertise compounds when you actually follow your interests and the
Hmm.
opportunity and not the prescribed path, which I think a lot of people feel very strongly that even now that there is some sort of magical path that if you just follow it, you will get to some rainbow end that is going to be amazing. And I just don't believe that that is true. And I think
I
that
agree.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I really think that like opportunities come up, and if you are not willing to say yes to them, you are not going to
Hmm.
learn as much. Like you are simply, and sometimes those opportunities are going to lead to abject failure, 100%.
Truly. Yes.
But I do think that like, one of the things that I have really appreciated about my career is I've learned so much more about communications by going to
Hmm.
so many different kind of corners of the nonprofit and advocacy
Yeah.
space and working in so many different areas. And if I had just been like, I am only a public health communicator, I would
Yes.
not have learned about equity in tech. If I had just said,
Yeah.
I'm only doing reproductive rights for my entire career, I would not have
Hmm.
learned, how to run comms at a boxing match, as we were trying to unionize boxers at Madison Square Garden. Like,
Well,
these are not things that I would have gotten to experience.
I
But
need to
it
have a whole
right.
nother conversation around all of these things, Jeannie.
But I would say it all rolls up to a piece of advice that my dad gave me years ago, which I hold very central to all of this, which
Hmm.
is do not turn down what has not been offered. And I think that it feeds into the imposter syndrome that many women
Yeah.
experience and that sort of thing. But it is that if an opportunity is in front of you, you don't have to take it. But if you
Right.
don't apply for that job, if you don't pitch that contract, if you don't have that conversation, you don't invite yourself to that networking event,
Yeah.
you are already turning down that opportunity before it's even been offered to you. And
Yeah.
so being the person that says, yes, I'm going to invite all of these things in across my own personal transom and
Hmm.
then deciding what to do with them, that is the power.
I love that. That's amazing. Well, like I said, we're going to have another conversation.
For sure.
Truly, I want to know about these boxing communications. So that might be on our own time. But this has been so great. Thank you so much for coming on.
You're
And
welcome. Thank you
can
for
you
having me.
can you tell people where to find you?
Absolutely. I can be found at gwrites.com. That's GWRITES.com.
Very nice. Well, great. Well, we will talk to you soon.
Sounds
And
good.
thanks again.
Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right.